So we're talking about parallel and perpendicular lines today, and we're going to concentrate on just how to tell if two lines are parallel or perpendicular. And so the main goal of today, or the main concept that you have to remember is if they give you two lines, no matter how they give you the information, you to know if they're parallel or perpendicular, what you're going to do is look at their slopes. Okay, so that's the main thing. So put a little star, and then make sure that you remember if they ask you if the two lines are parallel or perpendicular, that you're going to compare their slopes. So that's the main thing that you have to get. All right. So that'll come along in just a minute. Before I can talk about that, though, you have to know the difference between parallel and perpendicular. Okay. So first of all, parallel, it has a symbol, and it's pretty straightforward. It kind of looks like two parallel lines. So if you see that, they're talking about something to do with parallel. They might be asking you, is this line parallel to that one? And so they'll use that symbol. Perpendicular almost looks like an upside down T. So if you see that symbol, that's the perpendicular symbol. Okay. So now what does it mean to be parallel? Well, for two lines to be parallel, that means that those two lines will never touch no matter how far you extend those lines. Okay. And so these are going to be lines that will never do what's called intersect. That will never, I missed my word, that. Lines that will never intersect, no matter how far you extend your lines. Okay, so lines that will never intersect, no matter how far you extend them. Okay, so whenever you're looking at a picture, the way that they show you two lines are parallel. So like if they had two lines, and remember lines go on forever, so you're going to see the arrows. But to show in a picture that two lines are parallel, you're going to notice that they put a little arrow on them. And the lines that are parallel will have the same number of arrows. And so notice I put like a little arrow on each one of them. Okay. And so that's how they show you in a picture that they're parallel. So they can be kind of diagonal like that. They could be sideways. They could be vertical. As long as no matter how far you extend those lines, they never intersect, meaning they never cross, those lines will be parallel. Okay, so now perpendicular. A lot of people get confused about perpendicular lines, and they just think that, if they cross, they're perpendicular. And it's a little bit more than that. Okay, so perpendicular lines do intersect each other. They do cross each other, but it's a little bit more than that. So perpendicular lines, so I'll draw a little arrow here. Excuse me. Perpendicular lines are lines that intersect at 90-degree angles. So lines that intersect at 90-degree angles. And so that's a very appropriate symbol for them, because notice an upside down T, these two lines cross at 90-degree angles. And so if you're looking at a picture, to know if two lines are perpendicular, then you're going to look at the angles that they cross at. And so either they have to have that little box that means 90 degrees, or they can show you it a different way. So like if they have two lines crossing, to know that they're perpendicular, they have to have like a 90 in there. So they can either use the symbol for 90 degrees, or they can actually write that the degree is 90. Okay? So that's how you know just in general if two lines are parallel or perpendicular. Okay? Now with the stuff that they're going to be giving you for this lesson, they're not going to just show you the information that you would like to have. Like it'd be really nice if they just showed us those arrows every time, or it'd be really nice if they went ahead and showed us that there was a 90-degree angle. But they're not going to give us information like that. A lot of times if you look over here, they're going to give you like equations. or they might tell you the slope, and you're going to have to know if they're parallel or perpendicular, okay? And so, how do you tell? Well, that's what I was talking about up here, is if they give you information and they're asking you, are those two lines parallel or perpendicular, you're going to compare their slopes. So that means you have to find their slopes, okay? So once you find their slopes, parallel lines, the way that you know that they're parallel is parallel lines actually have the same slope. So parallel lines have the exact same, in every way, slope. Okay, so if you're looking at the slopes and they're exactly the same number, they're parallel lines. Okay, and so parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have what are called negative reciprocal slopes, and we'll break that down in a second. So they have negative reciprocal slopes. Okay, so what that means is whenever you find the slopes, so remember you have to find the slopes first, the negative part means that these two numbers will have different signs. They have different signs. And then the reciprocal part, you've heard that word before, but a lot of people forget what this word means. Reciprocal means that if you think about it like a fraction, their fractions are flipped from one another, okay? So I'll just put the fraction is flipped. Okay, now why is this? Why do parallel lines have the same slope and perpendicular lines have what are called negative reciprocal slopes? Well, if you think back to slope in general, remember slope tells you how steep or flat the line is. So it tells how steep or flat the line is. And so the lines that you're looking at are going to either be really, really steep or they're going to be closer to flat. And so if you're comparing the slopes, if you're comparing the steepness of your lines, and the steepness is exactly the same, then those two lines, if you think about it, those two lines, if they have the same steepness, will never cross, just for the simple fact that they have the same steepness, okay? Versus if they're exact opposites of each other, so like negative reciprocal pretty much means they're exact opposites of each other, then they're going to be exactly opposite directions of each other. And so that makes them perpendicular, okay? So just to give you some examples, if I gave you the slopes of a couple things, so let's say the slope of one line ended up being -3, and the slope of another line was -3, notice those are exactly the same steepness. The lines would be going down, and then they would have a pretty steep kind of angle to them because it's further away from 0. So these two lines, if that was the slope, would be parallel. So that would be an example of parallel lines. Whereas if you found the equation of two lines and you found the slope of each, and the slope of one of them was 1/2, and then the slope of another one was, I flipped that and changed the sign, was -2. And notice if I flip that, that's technically 2/1. And then if I change the sign, they have different signs. And then the fraction is flipped from one another. So these two would be perpendicular to each other. If you actually graphed them, you would see that they're perpendicular.